I still remember every word my mum said to me that day. I was in the madrasa, sitting on the edge of my thin mattress, the cold from the stone floor seeping into my feet. I had borrowed the office phone just to hear her voice. "Mum," I began gently, "I just wanted to check on you. How are you? How's everyone doing at home?" There was a short pause on the line, then she spoke. "Sophia, you've made yourself useless. Useless." That was the first word she threw at me. My heart thumped so hard it felt like my chest would crack. She didn't stop there. "You could have gone to college. You could be building your future right now. Instead, you're sitting in that madrasa, wasting your life away. You're always here and there, chasing things that won't help you. What's all this for?" I sat frozen. The sound of her voice was familiar, but the weight of her words felt foreign.
I wanted to tell her I wasn't wasting my life, that I was studying Quran, learning Arabic, and trying to understand the deen for myself. That every night before sleeping, I made dua for her. But my mouth stayed shut. I heard her sigh through the crackling line. "You should have listened to me, Sophia. One day you'll regret this." I whispered, "Okay, Mum, take care of yourself." The goodbye was quick. The click of the phone ending the call felt like the slamming of a door I couldn't reopen. I sat there in silence, my hands trembling in my lap. No smell of her cooking, no warmth of her smile, just her voice echoing in my mind. "You've made yourself useless." I closed my eyes and whispered, "Ya Allah, you know my heart. You know my intentions. Please, make her understand one day. Give me patience because right now, this hurts more than I can bear." And then, like it always did in the madrasa, the silence returned, heavy, suffocating, and full of questions I didn't know how to answer.
The words replayed in my mind all afternoon. I tried to focus on my fiqh notes, but every time I looked at the page, I saw her lips forming that one word, useless. In the madrasa, there wasn't much noise to distract me. No TV, no constant hum of city life, just the quiet shuffling of students' feet on the prayer hall carpet, the murmur of Quran recitation in the background, and the occasional call to prayer echoing from the minaret. Normally that peace felt comforting, but today it felt like a mirror, forcing me to face the ache inside. I wanted to be the strong student who smiled through trials, who never wavered. I wanted to prove, not just to my mum but to myself, that I could do this for Allah's sake. But doubts began to creep in. Maybe she's right. Maybe I am wasting my time. What if I graduate from here and still can't find a way forward? I remembered a hadith I once read. Whoever seeks a path in search of knowledge, Allah will make easy for him a path to paradise. That was the rope I clung to. I whispered under my breath, "Ya Allah, this is the only reason I'm here. Make it worth it. Don't let me fall apart now." After Maghrib, I sat outside on the small stone bench by the madrasa gate, watching the sky deepen into navy blue. The winter wind cut against my face, but I didn't move. That was when Ustad Karim, one of the younger teachers, walked by. "You're quiet tonight, Sister Sophia," he said, slowing his pace. I forced a smile, just thinking. He nodded knowingly but didn't press. "You know, the road to knowledge is rarely smooth. Shaitan will use any means to weaken your resolve, even the voices of those you love most." His words sank deep. I hadn't told him about the call, but somehow it felt like he knew exactly what had happened. When he left, I stared at the madrasa gate a little longer. I realized that my mother's voice wasn't my biggest enemy. My biggest enemy was the seed of doubt those words had planted in my heart, and if I didn't guard it carefully, it would grow. That night, I wrote one line in my notebook: "I will not quit. Not now, not ever." What I didn't know was that this resolve would soon be tested harder than I had ever imagined, and not by my mother this time. I was barely old enough to understand marriage when my parents' world, and mine, began to crumble. My earliest memories of home were full of quiet tension. Mum and Dad barely spoke unless it was about something urgent, but when they did, the words often carried a sharp edge. It all came to a head when Dad decided to marry a second wife. Mum's face hardened the day she found out. I didn't fully understand polygyny then, or the rights and responsibilities Islam had outlined for it. I only knew that the air in our house grew colder. They argued in the living room while I sat on the stairs, knees pulled to my chest. Their voices were low, but anger has a way of making even whispers sound loud. One night, Dad packed a small bag for Mum, handed her the keys to a rented flat, and left her there. Just like that. The place was small, barely furnished, but Mum tried to make it a home. She kept her headscarf on when she went out, even though by then her heart had drifted away from Islam. In the months that followed, the tension moved from our living room to a courtroom. Mum fought for custody of me and my siblings. I didn't understand legal papers, but I knew enough to sense fear that we might lose each other. When the judge ruled in Mum's favor, I thought life would settle. Dad was ordered to send a monthly allowance for our food and schooling. He did, for 3 months. Then the payments stopped. That's when the real struggle began. Mum became both breadwinner and parent. She took whatever work she could find, office temping, evening shifts, even part-time admin work at a local church. She never pressured us to attend services, but her connection to that place grew. Sometimes I'd sit quietly in the church office while she typed away, listening to hymns in the background, wondering what they meant to her now. I wanted to ask her, "Mum, do you still believe?" But I stayed silent. Through it all, I clung to the Quran I had been given as a child. I didn't yet understand every ayah, but I'd run my fingers over the Arabic letters, feeling an unspoken pull. I would whisper small du'as at night. Ya Allah, keep my heart close to you. Don't let me get lost. Looking back now, I think that was when my own journey truly began, in that small flat, with a fractured family and a seed of faith quietly taking root. But I didn't know then that the years ahead would test that seed in ways I could never imagine. By the time I turned 13, it was clear that Mum's connection to Islam had faded. She didn't pray, she didn't fast in Ramadan, and the Quran on her bookshelf gathered more dust than fingerprints. The only time I saw her wearing a headscarf was when she visited distant relatives who still practiced the faith. Most weekends, she was busy at the church office where she worked as a secretary for the pastor. I would sometimes tag along after school. I'd sit at the desk beside hers, doing my homework while listening to the muffled sound of choir practice in the main hall. Church members would pass by, smiling warmly at me. A few even asked why I never joined them for Sunday service. Mum never pressured me. She never said, "Leave Islam." In fact, in a strange way, she encouraged me to hold on to parts of it, at least on the surface. She would buy me colorful headscarves from the local market. "This one will suit your skin tone," she'd say, holding up a teal scarf against my cheek. But there was no reminder for Fajr, no gentle nudge to pray, no Bismillah before meals. Religion had become an accessory, not a way of life. And I could feel the absence. It made me think of an ayah I had once read in translation. So do not be like those who forgot Allah, and He caused them to forget themselves. I wondered if that was what had happened to her, if forgetting Allah slowly made her forget the parts of herself that once lit up with faith. Sometimes, when we were walking home together from the shops, she would talk about her past in Islam almost casually. "I remember when I was your age, I used to cover properly. Oh, and I could recite the short surahs by heart," she would say, like she was talking about an old hobby she'd grown out of. One evening, as she helped me fold laundry, I asked, "Mum, why don't you pray anymore?" She paused for a moment, holding a folded jumper in her hands. "Life changes, Sophia," she said quietly. "Sometimes you realize certain things aren't for you." I didn't know what to say. I just nodded, but inside my chest, a quiet ache grew. Her faith was slipping away, and I couldn't pull her back. But what I didn't realize then was that Allah was using even her absence to plant something in me, a determination to hold on tighter, to understand for myself what Islam really was. That seed would soon push me to take a step she never expected. It began quietly, almost by accident. One cold December afternoon, I found my Quran tucked away at the back of my bookshelf. The green cover was a little worn at the edges, the gold lettering slightly faded. I pulled it out and ran my fingers over the Arabic script, feeling a strange warmth in my chest. I don't know why I decided to open it that day. Maybe it was the stillness in the flat. Maybe it was the way the winter light poured into my room like a soft blessing. Whatever it was, I opened the Quran and didn't stop reading. I didn't skim through it like I used to. This time, I read it as if it was a letter written just for me. I lingered on every word, tasting each verse slowly. I had the English translation beside me, so I could understand the meanings. And the meanings, they cut right through me. I came across an ayah that made my eyes fill instantly. "Indeed, in the remembrance of Allah do hearts find rest." It was like Allah was speaking to the ache inside me, the one I'd carried since my parents split, the one my mother's absence in faith had deepened. I closed my eyes and whispered, "Ya Allah, I want that rest. Please give it to me." From that day, I read the Quran every evening. Sometimes an ayah would make me stop and cry quietly into my scarf. Other times I would find myself smiling, feeling like I had discovered a secret that the world around me had forgotten. I began to see my life differently. The struggles at home, the lack of money, even the way Mum and Dad had separated, it all started to make a painful kind of sense. I realized I had been living without fully understanding why Allah had placed me where I was. But now, I wanted to know. I wanted to understand Islam not as a label I'd been born into, but as a choice I would make with my whole heart. I wanted to know what it really meant to be a Muslim, and to live it, no matter who approved or disapproved. I started making small du'as in my room, whispering in the quiet. What I didn't know was that this search, this hunger for knowledge, would soon lead me to make the boldest decision of my life, and not everyone would welcome it. The more I read the Quran, the more questions began to form in my mind. Questions I couldn't ignore. I thought about my parents. I thought about the way their marriage had ended, the fights I had overheard, the bitterness that still lingered in every conversation they had about each other. And I wondered, what if they had understood Islam better? Would things have been different? Mum once told me that Dad had taken a second wife without preparing her heart, without proper discussion, without even attempting to guide the home with fairness. She said it was the breaking point, the wound that never healed. But she also admitted she didn't leave right away. She stayed until he told her to pack her things, and left her in that small rented flat. I didn't know all the details. I only knew that their faith had been something they wore loosely, like an accessory they could take off when it became inconvenient. And I couldn't help but think, maybe if they'd understood their religion deeply, they could have navigated those storms differently. That thought stayed with me. In the Quran, I found reminders that felt like they were written for people just like them, and just like me, and hold firmly to the rope of Allah altogether and do not become divided. I underlined that verse in my mushaf. I thought about how my family had let go of that rope, and how quickly everything had unraveled once they did. I didn't want my life to be another example of what happens when you only know Islam by name. I wanted to know it by heart. I wanted to know my Creator, my purpose, my obligations, everything that would keep me grounded no matter what storms came. That's when I started thinking about studying Islam properly, not just attending a weekly halaqah, not just watching a few online lectures. I wanted something deeper, structured, consistent, transformative. I began to research madrasas. Most were full-time, which meant I'd have to put my college plans on hold. But I told myself, if I don't do this now, when will I? I kept this desire close to my chest, especially around Mum. She had her own dreams for me, and they didn't involve Arabic classes or Islamic studies. She wanted me to go to university, to get a degree, to have a career that would keep me financially secure. I understood her fears, but my heart was pulling me in a different direction. At night, after everyone was asleep, I would whisper in the dark, Ya Allah, if this is good for me, open the doors. If it's not, close them and keep my heart firm. The doors would soon open, but in a way that would shake my life in ways I couldn't have predicted. Money was always tight in our little flat. After Dad stopped sending the court-ordered allowance, every expense, rent, bills, food, school, landed squarely on Mum's shoulders. She never complained out loud, but I could see it in the way she studied price tags for too long in the supermarket, or how her smile faded each time the postman dropped another bill through the letterbox. She took whatever work she could find. During the day she was an admin assistant at a small community center. On weekends, she picked up hours in the church office. Some evenings, she'd do odd jobs, sewing, typing documents, even baking for small events. She called it just a bit of side money, but I knew it was survival. I wanted to help. I didn't like watching her come home exhausted, her hands smelling faintly of detergent from cleaning jobs she'd taken on in secret. So, I started my own small hustle. At school, I had learned how to make simple desserts, cupcakes, brownies, biscuits. I decided to try selling them. Mum gave me a small loan from her own meager savings to buy ingredients. I still remember the way she handed me the notes, folded twice. Make it worth it, Sophia, she said, half smiling. I baked in the evenings, packaging everything neatly with ribbons and little handwritten tags. After Jumu'ah prayers on Fridays, I'd set up near the women's section with my small table, selling my treats to aunties who would smile and say, "Bless you, dear. May Allah put barakah in your hands." That dua meant more to me than the coins. Slowly I began to make a little profit. Not much, but enough to pay for my own stationery, my own bus fare, even small gifts for Mum and my siblings. It made me feel capable, less of a burden. At night, as I counted the coins into neat piles, I didn't have much, but I had Allah. And the belief that every effort, no matter how small, was seen by Him. But even with these little victories, I knew my dessert business wasn't the end goal. It was just a stepping stone. The pull towards studying Islam was still there, stronger than ever, and soon an opportunity would arise that would force me to choose between Mum's vision for my life and the path my heart was set on. By the time I finished my GCSEs, I had learned two things. 1. I could survive on very little. 2. Surviving wasn't the same as living. Mum was proud that I had made it through school without getting into trouble, but her mind was already on the next step, college. She wanted me to go straight in, study something practical, and secure a career path. She was still carrying her own regret, how she never finished university, and she didn't want me to repeat her mistakes. But there was a problem. She didn't have the money for my tuition. One evening, as we sat in the living room folding laundry, she sighed heavily. "Sophia, I can't pay for both you and your sister to go to college at the same time. It's just not possible. One of you will have to wait. Or go live with your dad." Her words lingered in the air. Going back to Dad's? I hadn't lived with him since the custody battle. The thought made me uneasy, not because I didn't care about him, but because life in his house was a different world entirely. Still, the decision came quickly. "I'll go," I said quietly. "I'll live with Dad for a while." It wasn't just about helping Mum financially. Deep down, I saw it as an opening. Dad might be more supportive of my desire to study Islam formally. Maybe, just maybe, this was the path Allah was opening for me. When I told Mum, she pursed her lips. "You're still my responsibility, Sophia. Just remember that." I nodded, but in my heart, I whispered a dua. "Ya Allah, guide me to what's best for my deen and dunya. Protect me from whatever could harm my faith." The day I moved, Dad met me at the station in his old car. The ride to his house was quiet except for the hum of the engine. His home was more spacious than Mum's flat, but colder in a different way. He had a structured routine, and everyone in the house followed it. Within a week, he enrolled me in an A-level program. It felt like progress, yet I couldn't shake the pull towards Islamic studies. I began to mention it casually to him during conversations. "Dad, I really want to go to a madrasa, even part-time. I want to understand Islam properly." He listened. He didn't dismiss me outright. That gave me hope, but I didn't know yet that soon he would give me a choice, one that would set my life on a completely different track. Living with Dad was different from Mum's world in every way. His home in Leicester was quieter, more traditional, and ran like clockwork. Fajr prayer was non-negotiable, meals were on time, and there was a certain seriousness in the air, as if the walls themselves demanded discipline. I kept my head down those first few weeks, settling into my A-level program and helping around the house. But my heart was still set on something else. I sat in class memorizing formulas or discussing literature. I found my mind drifting to the Quran, to tafsir, to the idea of sitting in a madrasa classroom learning the language of revelation. One evening, while Dad was sipping tea after Maghrib, I decided to speak. "Dad," I began, trying to keep my voice steady, "you know how I've always wanted to understand the deen properly?" He glanced at me over his cup. "Yes. I've been thinking, maybe I could join a madrasa, even part-time. Just something to help me learn Arabic and Islamic studies properly." He put his cup down slowly. "Part-time, The problem is, proper Islamic learning requires focus. It's not something you can just fit in here and there. If you're serious, you'll have to commit." His words were both encouraging and heavy. I wasn't expecting what came next. A few days later he called me into the living room. "Sophia," he said, "I've looked into it. There are no real part-time programs nearby worth your time, only full-time, so you have to choose. Continue your A-levels now and go to university. Or pause it all and go full-time into madrasa. You can finish your academic studies later if you want." It felt like the air thickened in the room. My mind raced. On one hand there was the safe route, education, degree, career. On the other, a path that could bring me closer to Allah, but was uncertain in the eyes of the world. I thought about my du'as in Mum's flat, my late-night Quran readings, the ache I felt when I saw Muslims who could understand the Quran in its original language. I looked at Dad and said softly but firmly, "I choose the madrasa." He studied my face for a moment, then nodded slowly. "All right. But once you choose this path, don't turn back halfway." That night, lying in bed, I felt a strange mix of excitement and fear. I didn't know what awaited me in that madrasa, only that this was the path my heart had been asking for, and I had no idea that my decision would come with trials far greater than anything I had faced so far. Once the decision for madrasa was made, I began preparing myself, not just for the timetable and the subjects, but for the kind of life I wanted to live while there. For months I had been thinking about modesty on a deeper level. Hijab wasn't new to me. I had worn it for years, but I found myself drawn to the idea of covering more, not less. I had read Islamic books, and listened to lectures explaining how the niqab, while not obligatory according to all scholars, was still a practice with strong roots in the Sunnah. Then Ramadan came. Dad and my stepmom were away for a few days visiting relatives, and I found myself alone with my thoughts. I told myself, if there's any time to take this step, it's now, in this blessed month. The next morning, I left for my A-level class wearing a black niqab for the first time. My classmates stared, some out of curiosity, others with barely concealed judgment. A few whispered, "She's probably just doing it for Ramadan." But when Eid came, I didn't take it off. Some days wearing it felt empowering. Other days it was a challenge, especially when strangers gave me suspicious glances or avoided standing next to me on the bus. I learned quickly that niqab was not just fabric, it was a statement. And in a way, it prepared me for madrasa life. If I could withstand judgment in the outside world, maybe I could handle whatever awaited me inside the madrasa walls. Still, I wasn't prepared for the reality I was about to face there. Because in my mind, a madrasa was a safe haven, a place of piety, discipline, and pure intentions. But as I would soon discover, even places built for learning Islam are not free from the tests of this dunya. The first thing I had to give up when I entered the madrasa was my phone. It wasn't a request, it was a rule. The principal explained that phones were a distraction from serious study, and I could only use one with special permission for emergencies. At first I thought it wouldn't be so bad. I imagined myself surrounded by books, immersed in the Quran, cut off from the endless scrolling and meaningless chatter of social media. But within a few days the reality hit me harder than I expected. Without a phone, my world shrank to the size of the madrasa walls. The only voices I heard were my classmates, the teachers, and the sound of Quran recitation echoing through the corridors. I couldn't just call my mum when I missed her. I couldn't message my sister to ask how she was doing. I couldn't even text a friend for a few words of encouragement. It was like being placed in a bubble, safe in some ways, but also painfully cut off. Our days followed a strict routine. Fajr in the prayer hall, Quran revision until breakfast, Arabic grammar, tajweed, fiqh lessons until dur. Lunch, short rest, then back to tafsir and hadith. Maghrib prayer, dinner, then more revision until Isha. There was no room for daydreaming, no space for wandering thoughts. But the quiet hours after Isha were the hardest. That was when I felt the loneliness the most, when I longed to hear my mother's voice, even if it was just to say goodnight. Sometimes, I borrowed the office phone for a quick call. I'd keep it short, not wanting to look needy. But those rare conversations were lifelines for me, small windows to the world outside. And yet, one evening, that precious connection brought me more pain than comfort. I had called Mum to check in, expecting the usual polite exchange, but instead, she told me the words that would echo in my mind for months to come. "Sophia, you've made yourself useless." It was a blow I wasn't ready for. The phone felt heavier in my hand. I tried to defend myself, to explain why I was here, but my voice wavered. Her words burned into me, leaving a hollow ache in my chest. That night, I sat alone on my thin mattress and whispered, "Ya Allah, you know my heart. You know why I'm here. Please, make this worth it." I didn't know it yet, but that moment, that single phone call, would mark the beginning of a much deeper test. The madrasa had quickly become my whole world. The prayer hall, the classrooms, the small dining area. They were the walls of my life now. I knew every sound the building made, every creak of the wooden floorboards, every hum of the radiator during cold mornings. But within the rhythm of my daily routine, something began to feel off. It started subtly. The principal, an older man with a reputation for strictness, seemed to take more notice of me than he did of the other students. At first, I thought it was because I was one of the few female students in the building. I stayed in separate accommodation, a small annex attached to the house of one of his wives, so maybe he just felt responsible for me. But then, there were moments that made my stomach twist. One afternoon, I was carrying books back from the library when I bumped into him in the corridor. Instead of just stepping aside, He stood still, his eyes lingering too long. "Working hard, I see," he said, his tone unusually warm. Another time, after a tafsir class, he called me over under the pretext of asking about my Arabic progress. His questions drifted from studies to personal matters, my family, my background, where I saw myself in the future. It wasn't inappropriate in words, but the attention felt strange, personal in a way that didn't sit right. I brushed it aside, telling myself I was overthinking. In Islamic spaces, we're taught to give people the benefit of the doubt. But doubts have a way of growing if they're fed, and soon, more incidents followed. One evening after Maghrib, I stayed back to organize my notes. Most students had already left the prayer hall. I heard footsteps behind me and turned to find him there again. He stood too close enough that I felt trapped between him and the wooden shelves. "You should rest more," he said softly, his gaze fixed. It was just a sentence, but my instinct screamed that something wasn't right. I forced a polite smile, mumbled an excuse about needing to revise, and stepped around him as quickly as I could. That night, as I sat cross-legged on my bed, my Quran open before me, I couldn't focus. I didn't know yet if I was imagining things, or if my gut was warning me for a reason, but I knew one thing: I needed to be careful. And soon I would learn that my unease was not without cause. Life in the madrasa had settled into a routine. I stayed in the principal's home, sharing the annex with his wife. Most days, she was kind and welcoming, and I would help her with small household tasks between my studies. Out of adab, I was careful about my movements in the house, always staying with her whenever non-mahram men, especially the principal, were around. One late afternoon, I was in the small room where I studied and rested. His wife was in the other room, busy with something. I don't know how it happened so suddenly, but the principal came into my space quietly. Before I could even stand or speak, he leaned in far too close. His hand brushed me in a way that sent a jolt through my body. Deliberate, wrong. Then, as if testing boundaries, he pressed closer, his face near mine. Even through my niqab, I felt his intent. The fabric shielded me physically, but it couldn't block the violation of that moment. He had never seen my face before, and yet here he was, crossing a line I never thought he would dare to cross. I froze, my mind racing. Did that just happen? I told myself it must be a one-off, a terrible lapse, but it wasn't. Over the days that followed, there were other moments. A too long glance, finding excuses to be near me when his wife wasn't in sight, brushing past me in ways that were not accidental. At first I kept it to myself. I didn't want to cause trouble. I didn't want to believe that a man entrusted with teaching could behave like this. Then, slowly, other girls joined the madrasa. Over time, during quiet conversations, one of them hinted that she had experienced something strange with him. I stayed silent, until another sister I knew from a different part of the school brought it up more openly. That's when I told her my experience. She looked at me with a heavy sigh. "I've heard it before," she said. She told me about meeting him alone on the staircase, and the inappropriate way he had behaved. The puzzle pieces were falling into place. It wasn't just me. By then, I had already spoken to my stepmother during one of her visits. I poured out everything, every incident, every uneasy moment. She listened, her face tight with anger, and then she gave me advice I will never forget. "Face him. Tell him directly you will not accept this. Make it clear that it must stop." Her words gave me courage. One day when I saw that he was alone in his office, I walked in. My heart was pounding, but I didn't let my voice shake. With tears pricking my eyes, I told him plainly, "What you have been doing is wrong. I don't want it." He didn't apologize. He didn't show shame. Instead, he looked at me as though I was foolish, as if I didn't understand what I was saying. He brushed it off, making me feel small, as though the fault was mine for speaking up. But I knew it wasn't, and even though he refused to acknowledge it, I had drawn my line. After that day in his office, things changed, for a while. The stares lessened, the accidental brushes stopped. I told myself maybe he had finally understood, maybe my tears and my words had been enough, but weeks later, it began again, subtle at first, lingering in spaces where I happened to be, appearing suddenly when his wife stepped out, positioning himself too close without reason. I recognized the pattern, and I knew I couldn't go through another direct confrontation, so I changed my own movements. I learned to sense where he was in the building and quietly alter my path. I made sure never to linger in the annex unless his wife was there. If I saw him in the corridor, I stepped aside, kept my gaze down, and moved quickly. It wasn't just fear. It was also the worry that if I told more people, they would think I was trying to ruin his reputation. In a place like this, where respect for teachers ran deep, such an accusation could turn against me, so I carried the burden quietly, telling no one knew. To the outside world, I was just another student in black niqab, moving through my madrasa days with my books and my dua beads. Inside, I was counting down the months until I could leave. In my quiet moments after Fajr, or before bed, I would raise my hands and whisper, Ya Allah, keep me steadfast, protect me from harm, don't let my heart be shaken. Let me finish what I came here for. And he did. By the mercy of Allah, I completed my studies without another major incident. The day I left the madrasa, I walked out with my certificate in hand, my head high. The walls behind me still held memories I wished I could erase, but I had survived. It was just one of the many tests Allah had placed in my path. A reminder that even in places of learning, trials can find you, but also a reminder that His protection is real for those who call on Him. Back to what I was saying earlier. Life in the madrasa wasn't only about Quran recitation, fiqh lessons, or my personal tests with the principal. There were other conversations happening quietly in the background. Some of them I brushed off with a laugh, others that slowly began to take shape. The principal's wife often teased me about marriage. You're young, Sophia. You should be thinking about getting married, she would say over tea. Two thoughts always crossed my mind whenever she brought it up. I have so many years ahead of me, and I still have college to attend, at least 3 more years. Marriage felt far away, something for a different season of my life. But one afternoon she came to me with a more specific suggestion. I have a friend, she said, smiling knowingly. She has sons. I think you would like one of them. I gave her the same excuse I always gave. That's not my focus right now, I said, chuckling. But she pressed a little harder. You should at least hear him out. He's in his final year of college, good family, religious upbringing. They've raised their children in love and with strong Islamic values. He's also a twin. His brother is already promised to someone else. This one is still available. I still laughed it off, but she wasn't joking. She told me his mother wanted to speak with me. Since I didn't have a phone, madrasa rules, she handed me hers. The boy's mother was warm, polite, and encouraging. Then she told me, he'll call you himself. When he did, we spoke briefly on the principal's wife's phone. He seemed polite, a little shy, but respectful. Then he asked, can I see your picture? We were going behind closed doors here, with the knowledge and even the help of both mothers, but without my own mother knowing anything. I could never tell her, she already disapproved of me being in the madrasa. Adding marriage talks on top of that? Impossible. I told him I couldn't use a phone in madrasa, but I had day student friends who had smartphones. I asked one of them to take a picture of me and send it to him. He did the same. It was a small, careful exchange. From there, the mothers continued their quiet arrangements. They wanted us to be comfortable with each other before involving the fathers. When they finally did, it became more formal. The boy's father called the principal called my father, and just like that, the proposal moved forward.